we just kind of wanted to like make a choice and stick with it and choose something very Los Angeles. And so Frank Lloyd Wright as like the inspiration was just like Seth's obsessed with him, and as soon as he said it, we were just like, oh yeah, for sure. Because we also had, as this clip very specifically gets into, we had this thought that it's like a temple to cinema, that it should be like a cathedral almost. It's based on a Seth said that, I think it was to Seth, that Lorne Michaels once said to him or to someone else, they were marveling at what 30 Rock looks like and how crazy it is. And he was like, well, it's a temple to cinema. When new religions are formed, they always build epic temples. And so that was kind of the inspiration. Is like, this shouldn't just be a building, it should be an epic temple. Which also caused a problem that we dealt with in this clip, which is we had to like talk about how she spent too much money on the place. Because like on that first day we were shooting in there, we were like, this is too nice and we need to like story wise justify it or it's gonna seem crazy. So we added
Yeah.
that line on the day that it cost too much, and it's one of the reasons she was getting fired. Hi, I'm Evan Goldberg, one of the creators, producers, writer, directors of the studio, and I'm here with Adam Newport Barra, who is the one and only cinematographer on the show.
Hey, do I smell? I didn't go home last night.
Yes, you really smell like vodka.
Oh, just vodka? That's fine.
Until we watched that, I completely forgot how complicated that exact shot was. I also think that was 3 shots, but I can't quite remember. Should we
I
walk
think it
through it?
was, yeah. Well, and the funny thing is, this is also just the second half of what was, basically a 10-minute sequence that was all one shot, like technically one kind of long continuous shot in the show. We had just come in through a window in the building into our set, and we were on a Ronin with Jesse, our operator, carrying it. And I remember Jesse was just carrying the Ronin, but the actual head was being operated by Mark, our A camera operator, who had this rig on his shoulder that has a gyroscope in it, and it's called mimic mode for the Ronin, which is the stabilizer. And so Mark is holding a fake camera with a monitor on it that's seeing what the camera's seeing, and he's doing the panning and the tilting. And we have this hilarious video of him running in place so that the camera would look like it had some jiggle to it. It's maybe one of my favorite behind the scenes videos of the entire shoot, because it's literally just Mark, this incredibly ripped bulk man, just kind of prancing in place while, shooting, and he's just off frame. So Jesse runs along with this Ronin, slams it onto a techno crane that has a hook on it. And mind you, this techno crane is counterbalanced to have this camera on it. So for the first, minute of the take, when it's not on there, there's 8 grips that are holding that crane, so that it doesn't plummet to earth because it's so heavy on the back end. As soon as Jesse pops it on there, all those grips can let go. They then have to push the base of the crane into the middle of the set so that there's room for it to extend up to the balcony while the guys are walking up. And then from there, actually, no, that's not true. So Jesse hadn't grabbed it yet. It was on the crane there. It came through the window. Jesse was waiting on the balcony. He pulled it off the crane. He's then carrying it for the rest of the scene, and he has to carry it, quite high. The video is hilarious. He's holding it like with his arms outstretched like this. And he carried that up to Seth and Chase running into Seth's office, at which point they round the corner. There's a blip where they exit frame, and then we stitch that into a handheld whip that Mark, our A camera operator, was operating, and he operated the rest of the scene handheld.
Yeah, and then I think like we go to the phone. I think
The
that's a
phone is
stitch
another
point.
stitch point. Yeah. Which I'm
Yeah,
not
and then
sure why we did that. I think that was literally just to give you guys more options in the edit if you wanted to put 2 takes together.
well, we used that option because we had a
Yeah.
different take where Seth went like this, and we thought it was a little silly, so we used a
Yeah.
different take. Was the hook magnetic?
We tested a few different um, options. I remember during their first test shoot on the stage, we ended up with a camera and about 15 pieces on the ground because we were using a magnet mount. I'm not sure you were there for this.
I was not.
But we literally tested. This was one of the first tests we did, and we were testing this particular shot because we all knew we wanted to do some really fun shots moving up and down the floors. And we tried at first doing it with like a an old school man crane where literally Mark would jump onto a crane, we'd lift him up and he would walk off, and we had removable parts of the balcony. We decided that was too clunky. So we started using the Ronin, and we originally started with a magnet mount where you has a little pin and it goes into the mount and they turn on a switch and it turns on a magnet. But what we realized is it was really hard to fit a little pin in a small hole while running at full speed. So the grips literally, it was like trying to watch like space docking. It was just like seeing like the space station come together. It was so brutal to go that slow. So we ended up just building a rack that was just literally like, it looked like a forklift at the end of the techno crane with a pretty big space to land. So Jesse would just be running and he'd kind of just throw that thing on there. There'd be a guy who would latch it in so that if it did fall, it wouldn't end up in 10 pieces. And so we ended up doing that for most of our crane shots. We still use, as you know, a lot of magnet mounts for like the hood mounted car stuff. But for the crane stuff, we ended up just kind of creating this little shelf for the gimbal to rest on.
Well, should we? I guess let's back it up to the top into pre-production and get at why we filmed it the way we filmed it, what lenses we used, and all that. You want to explain why we chose to do? Well, I guess I can explain like story-wise.
Yeah, I actually wanted to know at what point in the process you guys came up with the idea, because by the time I was hired, I mean, that was part of my intro to the project, was like, you guys were like, we want to shoot this all in oneers. And so I didn't know if it was from the beginning or if that was like an epiphany you had while you were writing.
It was Seth had just been complaining about coverage in general.
Mm-hmm.
Like as an actor, he was like, I'm doing coverage that's unnecessary and I know it's unnecessary and it's really annoying me. So he kept complaining to me about it and saying that the next time we did something, he wanted to try to do something different, something more efficient, and something that like demanded accuracy in a way that that didn't rely on editorial. And then him and I started talking about how like we always do 2-3 cameras, improv fest, edit it all together later, and just how like we're good at that. We've done it a dozen times, and we wanted to do something different. And then we started talking about this actual project and honed in after talking with a bunch of studio heads on the concept of panic as like the primary motivating like energy that takes you through the show. Then we talked about how like, and this is the end, we wanted you to feel like you were trapped in the house with the guys, so we were handheld largely with them. So we combined those things and decided we should be like mostly handheld and like feel like you're in the room with the people. And I can't recall if we came to this decision with you or before you were there, but then we also talked about how if you're really in the room with people, you only have one pair of eyes, so we should only do one size and one lens.
Yeah, I couldn't remember that either because I thought it was your guys' idea, but then I saw Seth say in an interview that it was my idea. And then I was like, wasn't sure where it came from, but I think it became kind of the obvious choice. It's like, why, if you're going to create such a strong approach to it, it just seemed obvious that one lens would kind of make the most sense. And I think we messed around with a couple different focal lengths in the first week, and then we realized it was a waste of time because we were talking about focal lengths instead of shooting and rehearsing. And,
yeah, well,
and it's very liberating to just have to not even have to think about those choices.
Well, a thing that I constantly think about when it comes to our choice to use one lens is that it also lets everyone in the crew, it gives everyone the superpower of being able to tell exactly what's on screen without even looking at the monitors.
So true.
Yeah, after a certain amount of time, we all know, and like you could see like people looking at the camera being like, it's not gonna work, or like this isn't right, or whatever, because they could immediately picture it because it was always the same and just gave you the same. Oh, which leads me to a funny question. We like talk about putting on this lens and that lens. We talked about it once and never talked about it again. I don't remember what it was. I don't remember what we used.
We used a 21 millimeter Zeiss Master Prime.
Zeiss Master Pro?
Prime.
Yeah. There you
go. And I think it was the perfect lens because it was wide enough for a wide field of view. You could easily obtain a wide shot in a room, but you could also get close to somebody and it wasn't so distorted. It wasn't super unflattering. I think those wide lenses can get pretty gnarly on people's faces when you get right up in their grill. And I feel like this was just riding the edge of that where it didn't bend people's faces. And that particular 21 millimeter is like very rectilinear, so you don't get a lot of distortion. So it feels very like real and immediate. It doesn't feel like there's a veneer of, something fake on it. It feels very just like immediate.
Why does it get limited distortion? What about is it like what about that?
It's just a well designed lens, and I think I'm not like an optics master. I don't really know a ton about the science behind it, but Zeiss tends to make very clean, sharp, very accurate lenses without a lot of aberrations, and so I kind of wanted to lean on something that was a little bit cleaner and sharper and had more contrast, which I think was nice because
Hmm.
a lot of times we pick these softer lenses because we're trying to smooth over something or we're trying to avoid seeing detail. And I could tell very quickly that we were going to build a really incredible world. And we had a lot of amazing people on camera, a lot of really beautiful people, a lot of really interesting faces. And I was like, there's no need to like blur. I tested some older, softer lenses and it just felt like I was missing the detail that we were giving it. You know what I mean? I felt like I really just
Yeah,
wanted
yeah.
to bring everything out. And I think that you know, Julie did a great job with production design and Cami did an amazing job with costume and even like the hair and makeup team. Like everyone did such a good job that I wanted to like feel and see all that. I didn't want to like soften it to the point where we were missing things. And also that particular lens, it's very fast. It shoots at a 1.3 aperture, which lets in a lot of light. So we could use a lot of natural light and it's still sharp at that stop. So it's just a very versatile lens and it has a super close focus. So we could get really close to someone's face and not need any like diopters or any special filtration. And then I could whip pan to a wide and we could rack to infinity and it would still hold everything. So it's just a really versatile lens.
Should we talk about Julie Burkhoff, production designer, and what you guys did together to pull off the many, 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 many things you did? Like, for example, the shot we just watched, like that's in the office, which is a complete build that
Yeah.
was designed very much to your specs to make sure you could do what you needed to do.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I was really impressed with what you guys kind of ideated with her. I had no idea what I was coming into as far as design went when I first joined the show. I think I loved the material. It all like made sense to me, but like the writing didn't necessarily explain how special the locations were going to be. And I was surprised and like really pleasantly surprised at your guys' take on like what the office was going to be. And I was curious like where that came from and why you guys chose to sort of like homage kind of like older architecture and older Hollywood. And I'd be curious to hear more about that. 'Cause I feel like
I
that.
think like a lot of it, we spent a lot of time on Paramount, and that lot just had some like nice old flair, and we spent a lot of time on Sony, and that was a mishmash of like some old buildings, but a lot of newer buildings.
Once I saw that design, I sort of I under like it made it that much more special to me because I think it could have just as easily been like an office comedy, you know, um, which is also great. Like those shows can be great, like sort of the banality of being in an office, but you guys like leaned into it being really special, and I think that to me, the second I saw that design, I kind of went up to Julie freaking out, being like, how are we going to be able to maintain this level of sort of like beauty and like uniqueness in all of our locations? So I feel like from then on, everyone really took it upon themselves to push ourselves to always find the best locations, no matter what, and to never settle for anything mediocre because it just like the second we built that set, we had a certain bar we had to keep for the rest of the show. You know what I mean? And so for me and Julia I was always just we were really honest with each other about like what we thought looked good and what we thought didn't look good, and we really tried not to settle. There were plenty of times where we could have been like, that'll work, but we realized very quickly it was like paramount to how the show felt, to pick the right locations, and also a lot of it was informed by just if I could light it or not and how I could light it because we were always lighting basically 360, right? So there were times where I would see a location and just be like, there's really like no way to do what we want to do without having to light it in a particular way. And I did get into a couple jams and we always found a way to make it work. But that was definitely a big part of it, was just making sure it worked for like our process and it could still be fun.
Do you remember one of the bigger jams, like where we were on location or something like that? That was a real problem.
I mean, I think the Wonder location was the hardest location by far. Just because, the whole episode takes place over the course of like 45 minutes, 30 minutes in one location. And of course, you guys chose the most difficult possible location, which is
That was the joke. I'm sorry, it's a comedy.
a
That was
house,
the joke.
a house on a ridge that had no flat space. All the walls were windows, and had a 360 view of horizons. So cheating, we couldn't cheat dusk. We had to shoot at dusk, and there was almost nowhere to put crew or gear. Like normally for a dusk scene, if I have to cheat dusk, I'm like, okay, I could, if we had to, I could use some cranes to block the sun and then add other lights on cranes out of frame to, fake lower sunlight. There's lots of tricks we have as filmmakers to make dusk when it's not dusk. But usually that requires some space outside of the location. Whereas here, you literally have the house, and the second you walk 10 feet outside of the house, it just drops, it plummets. So there was nowhere to put cranes, nowhere to put big equipment. So we really just had to lean in to what was there. And, we we kind of like stashed a couple lights in places that were harder to see. We also used some lights that kind of felt like they were part of the movie they were shooting. But that by far was the most difficult location. But I think a lot of the historical architectural masterpieces like those Lautners are very challenging to shoot in, mostly because they're all on these steep slopes or tucked into little valleys or canyons, like Matt's house, for example, house in the show. That Lautner is incredibly beautiful, but it's, again, walls of windows. And, if you're shooting away from the window, it's often just really dark wood. So you have to figure out how to light through the windows without, basically throwing light onto the actors with the light at your back, which is front light, which is not great. And then make sure not to cause any shadows as we're moving around them, right? Because, the camera's always moving. So we always have to be really mindful not to be throwing shadows all over the actors' faces. Whereas like The Office, for example, we had beautiful big skylights. So you have this gorgeous light coming in from the ceiling at all times. So you can always rely on that to create some really flattering light on people and be moving around 360.
Do you have any hopes or fears or things you're excited for season 2 when it comes to where we could film? Because we got to one up it all.
I know. No, I mean, I love the challenges. I think they're the best part of, that's why this show works. I think it's because everyone is like challenged on another level. Not only me, but you guys, the actors. It pushes everyone to work. And I think those confines are where we make the most creative choices. So I think it's up to you guys to give us those challenges and right. So I really want to do some like big action chase scene. That's what I'm calling for.
Oh, we got one. Oh, you had the same idea. We can't say it on this, but you had the same
No.
idea that we had
No.
said.
I know.
Because that means it's a good idea.
Yeah, I just want to go bigger and better and funnier, and I just have more cameos and just have fun. You guys have created such a fun environment, and I think that's also like what makes the show so great is that you guys are really positive and funny and fun and keep a really good set.
We might come back jaded. We could be different when we get back. We'll see.
Who knows?
And I think that's all the time we have for this interview.
Cool.
So, Adam and Evan signing out.
Thanks, guys.
Peace.
Bye-bye.